Hi everyone, welcome back to The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. In our last video, we saw that the time traveler was still speaking with his guest and describing the creatures, as he called them, that he had met in the future, which were quite different from him, or from himself, I should say. So we'll just take it from there and continue with his descriptions of things. And I think that he had just gotten into a building and it was describing what he was seeing. Okay, so let's get going. Between the tables was scattered a great number of cushions. Upon these, my conductors seated themselves, signing for me to do likewise. With a pretty absence of ceremony, they began to eat the fruit with their hands, flinging peel and stalks and so forth into the round openings in the sides of the tables. I was not loath to follow their example, for I felt thirsty and hungry. As I did so, I surveyed the hall at my leisure. And perhaps the thing that struck me the most was its dilapidated look. The stained glass windows, which displayed only a geometrical pattern, were broken in many places, and the curtains that hung across the lower end were thick with dust. And thick. And it caught my eye that the corner of the marble table near me was fractured. Nevertheless, the general effect was extremely rich and picturesque. There were perhaps a couple of hundred people dining in the hall, and most of them seated as near to me as they could come, were watching me with interest, their little eyes shining over the fruit they were eating. All were clad in the same soft and yet strong, silky material. fruit, by the by, was all their diet. These people of the remote future were strict vegetarians. And while I was with them, in spite of some carnal cravings, I had to be frugivorous also. Frugivorous. Oh, there goes Kayla. As thirsty as ever. Okay. Indeed, I found afterwards that horses, cattle, dogs had followed the ichthyosaurus into extinction. Really, horse, cattle, and dogs were extinct. Let me just... Okay. But the fruit were very delightful. One in particular that seemed to be in season all the time I was there. A flowery thing in a three-sided husk was especially good, and I made it my staple. At first, I was puzzled by all these strange fruits, and by the strange flowers I saw, but later to perceive their import. However, I am telling you of my fruit dinner in the distant future now. So soon as my appetite was a little checked, I determined to make a resolute attempt to learn the speech of these new men of mine. Clearly, that was the next thing to do. The fruit seemed a convenient thing to begin upon, and holding one of these up, I began a series of interrogative sounds and gestures. I had some considerable difficulty in conveying my meaning. At first, my efforts met with a stare of surprise, or inextinguishable laughter. But presently, a fair-haired little creature seemed to grasp my intentions and repeated a name. Okay, considerable efforts, and they had to chatter and explain the business at great length. To each other. In my first attempt, or I should say my first attempts, to make the exquisite little sounds of their language caused an immense amount of amusement. However, I felt like a schoolmaster amidst children, and persisted, and presently I had scored I had a score of noun substantive at least at my command, and then I got to demonstrative pronouns and even the verb to eat. It's language, and then okay. But it was slow work, and the little people soon tired and wanted to get away from my interrogation. So I determined, rather of necessity, to let them give their lessons in little doses when they felt inclined. And very little doses, I found they were before long, for I never met people more indolent or more easily fatigued. People. A queer thing I soon discovered about my little hosts, and that was their lack of interest. They would come to me with eager cries of astonishment, like children. But like children, they would soon stop examining me and wander away after some other toy. The dinner and my conversational beginnings ended. I noted for the first time that almost all of those who had surrounded me first were gone. It is odd, too, how speedily I came to disregard these little people. I went out through the portal into the sunlit world again. As soon as my hunger was satisfied, I was continually meeting more of these men of the future who would follow me a little distance, chatter and laugh about me, and having smiled and gesticulated in a friendly way, leave me again to my own devices. Conversational. These men and gesticulated. Okay. The calm of evening was upon the world as I emerged from the great hall, and the scene was lit by the warm glow of the setting sun. At first things were very confusing. Everything was so entirely different from the world I had known. Even the flowers. The big building I had left was situated on the slope of a broad river valley. But the Thames had shifted perhaps a mile from its present position. I resolved to mount to the summit of a crest, perhaps a mile and a half away, from which I could get a wider view of this our planet in the year 800 and 2000 and 180. For that, I should explain was the date the little dials of my machine recorded. Calm of evening, and I could. Okay. As I walked, I was watching for every impression that could possibly help to explain the condition of ruinous splendor in which I found the world. For ruinous it was. A little way up the hill, for instance, was a great heap of granite bound together by the masses of aluminum, a vast labyrinth of precipitous walls and crumpled heaps, amidst which were thick heaps of very beautiful pagoda-like plants, nettles, possibly, but wonderfully tinted with brown about the leaves and incapable of stinging. It was evidently the derelict remains of some vast structure. To what end built, I could not determine. It was here that I was destined at a later date to have a very strange experience. The first intimation of a still stranger discovery. But of that I will speak in its proper place. Okay, ruinous splendor and aluminum. How come that's not in the dictionary? Aluminium. Oh, there it is. I guess it's not spelled the same way. And then structure. Okay. Oh, and thick heaps. Looking around with a sudden thought, from a terrace on which I rested for a while, I realized that there were no small houses to be seen. Apparently the single house, and possibly even the household, had vanished. Here and there among the greenery were palace-like buildings, but the house and the cottage, which form such characteristic features of our own English landscape, had disappeared. Communism, said I to myself. And on the heels of that came another thought. I looked at the half dozen little figures that were following me. Then, in a flash, I perceived that all had the same form of costume, same soft, hairless visage, and the same girlish rotundity of limb. It may seem strange, perhaps, that I had not noticed this before, but everything was so strange. Now I saw that the fact plainly enough. In costume and in all the differences of texture and bearing that now mark of the sexes from each other. These people of the future were alike. And the children seemed to my eyes to be but the miniature of their parents. I judged then that the children of that time were extremely precocious. Physically, at least, and I found afterwards abundant verification of my opinion. Seeing the ease and security in which these people were living, I felt that this close resemblance of the sexes was, after all, what one would expect for the strength of a man and the softness of a woman. The institution of the family and the differentiation of occupation are mere militant necessities of an age of physical force where populations let's see here, the population seeing the ease. Okay, where population is balanced and abundant, much childbearing becomes an evil rather than a blessing to the state, where violence comes but rarely, and offspring are secured. There is less necessity, indeed, there is no necessity for an efficient family and the specialization of the sexes with reference to their children's need disappear. We see some beginning of this even in our own time, and in this future age it was complete. This, I must remind you, was my speculation at the time. Later, I was to appreciate how far it fell short of the reality. While I was musing upon these things, my attention was attracted by a pretty little structure. Like a well under a cupola. I thought in a transitory way of the oddness of wells still existing, and then resumed the thread of my speculations. There were no large buildings towards the top of the hill, and as my walking powers were evidently miraculous, I was presented, left alone for the first time, with a strange sense of freedom and adventure. I pushed on up to the crest. Okay, so I think we're gonna end here. He's going up to a hill, and next time we'll see what he's seeing. So thank you so much for watching and listening. If you're not subscribed, please join us. And if you like this video, you can give it a thumbs up. I would really appreciate it. And you guys take care, and I will see